Where are the biggest gaps in the consumer space of India, sir?
2-3 things, right? My first thesis is generally compete in the least competed spaces. It's almost always better. So picking a niche is a much better way to build a brand because your unit economics are better. It allows you to invest back in brand building, etc., etc. I'll give you an example from one of our brands. MyFitness is our healthy snacking brand. The space in the market, in my mind, is there is a movement towards protein and health. But Indians genuinely want taste, right? In India, by the way, without taste, nothing sells. So we said, by the way, how can you be health ka tasty partner? That's the tagline. And I think there is a space there. And we picked peanut butter as a niche. Peanut butter is actually an emerging niche because Indians are becoming more health conscious. We have whatever, call it 30-35% vegetarian population which need a protein source. And people are working out. So the insight at some level was people who work out need a quick protein intake. And this is not the mother sort of spreading peanut butter on a sandwich and giving it to the child. It's actually, by the way, a gym goer taking 1 scoop of peanut butter and eating it. So the reason I'm telling you this is peanut butter may not seem like a large business, right? But if you take peanut butter as a niche category and you dominate it, we are at 22% market share. We're the largest player, right? And we did 2 innovations. One is we said we know our consumer audience well, which is it's a gym goer. Therefore, if you look at our peanut butter, there's no oil separation. The reason that's important is if you're spreading it, there's no problem with oil separation, right? When you open a peanut butter jar, you'll usually have some oil separation. Ours does not. And the reason that's important is the gym goer is not spreading it on bread. He's taking a spoon, taking a scoop and eating it.
Yeah.
And I think lack of oil separation makes it dramatically easier. It may seem small, right? But it's actually a big insight in order to basically say, I can dominate a space. Or I'll tell you, we were the first ones to launch a chocolate peanut butter. Why a chocolate peanut butter? Because most people are eating Nutella. Nutella or hazelnut spreads of all kinds, right? That's whatever, 45-50% sugar. Can we create a healthy alternative which tastes good? Again, going back to the insight of health, but taste as well. So we created a chocolate peanut butter, which actually tastes very good, but has less than 10% sugar. So you need 1 or 2 consumer insights. You need to pick a niche space. Then if you want to say, how can I build this into a 1,000 crore brand, for example, right? In my mind, you shouldn't think 100. I think a brand in India is 1,000 crores, right? That's when you've arrived. I think 100 crores is the first milestone, but you should have a vision to get to 1,000 crore. This, by the way, is a 200-250 crore type business. We think we can take it to 1,000 crores.
Okay.
Why do we think that? First, can we take it to other markets? Again, this ambition about being global. We launched the Middle East and it's starting to do really well in the Middle East, right? So how can you, and the reason that's interesting is if you take the TAM of peanut butter alone in India, it's probably 1,200-1,300 crores, right? Yeah, that's why we're 22% of the market. But if you add the Middle East, you add another 2,000 crores. Right? Suddenly the market, addressable market sort of triples, right? So how do you go in a niche space where you can dominate, but across the world? And then you can start to build a large brand, right? The other way to sort of we're expanding is, you know, if you think about your life as healthy snacking and your health ka tasty partner, and the name is MyFitness.
Yeah.
You know, going global is important because it changes the TAM that you can really go after. And I think if you have the right product, and the right distribution, there is nothing preventing Indian consumer companies from going global, right? So, and then the third angle of expanding, right, where you start with a smaller TAM, dominate it and scale is, we're going from peanut butter, which is a protein, healthy snacking thing, to saying all of healthy snacking. So we've launched protein bars, right? We're launching whey. You know, so it's possible to expand with a strong brand presence in one category to adjacent categories. And each of these starts adding 500 crores, 1,000 crores to the TAM. And suddenly you have a 5,000, 7,000 crore market, out of which if you're 20%, you know, you're there, right? So that's a little bit of how we think about it. And I think MyFitness is a primary example of picking a niche, sort of saying I'll dominate it. I will have a structural advantage based on a couple of consumer insights and then really take it global and sort of build the surrounding categories, right? And I think so that's one example of a niche. I'll give you another example of a niche. One of our brands is called Propz.
Party props.
Yeah, which you may have heard of, right? But Propz is actually half the market of it. The tagline of the brand is something I love. It's make every celebration magical.
Okay.
Right? So we sell boxes of happiness.
Okay.
So you can have a 50th birthday party saying unicorn as a theme, or you can have a 50th day birthday party, you can have a Ganesh Chaturthi celebration. What we do is we curate a set of balloons, streamers, paper products, names, etc., that come in a nice box for you to self-decorate and DIY and sort of celebrate. Why is this an interesting space? India's GDP is going up, global GDP is going up. It is actually celebrations and sort of marking occasions is something that's becoming bigger.
Yeah.
It is an unorganized space. Lots and lots of small players, right? Every city, I'm sure Bombay has it, but every city has a street where you can go buy balloon streamers, etc., right? But nobody's ever built a brand out of it. Why not? Right? Why not? Usually is because it's an operational problem. This is a very wide SKU assortment. Usually you have between 2,000 and 5,000 SKUs.
Okay.
Right? Very hard to manage. But it's an 80% gross margin business, right? Because whether you sell for 600, 599, 499 or 699, when you want birthday celebrations for your child or for yourself, what do you care about? You care about quality, you care about design, and you care about on-time delivery. Right? You don't care about the price. I mean, whether it's 100, 200, 300 rupees, or we sell this in the US as well. Whether it's $1, $2, $3 this way, that way, nobody cares. So it's an interesting niche, right? Again, this has now become a large business for us because there is an opportunity to actually become a 50% market share player, right? And then it's very similar to, you need a lot of tech to manage it. So a small player cannot sort of build all the tech because if you have 3,000 SKUs, you'll run 50,000 campaigns. To run 50,000 campaigns, you need a tech platform in ads, right? So there are niches that you can pick where people are not competing and build global businesses from there. And I think it's a massive opportunity. I think Indian consumer brands should go global and Indian consumer brands should say, what is the niche I want to play? So MyFitness is an example of that. Propz is an example of that, where you can sort of start at a niche, sort of build around, surround around it, and then go global and start to dominate globally.
So this is such an interesting insight because when somebody thinks of building a 1,000 crore consumer brand, they would never think of party props.
Yes.
Right? And like you mentioned about peanut butter, all of them are built on consumer insights.
Yep.
How do you get these consumer insights?
Yeah. So I think there's an art and a science too, how you sort of do this. Firstly, there is now a lot of data and very, very few people actually spend real time on the data, right? One of the things we constantly do, and we'll talk a little bit more about technology in a bit, but what we have done is we constantly keep scanning, right? It can be as simple as what's called an SQP report, right? Search Query Performance Report, which is a classic Amazon report that comes out. You can basically look for different categories. And one of the things I look for is which search terms have more than a 25% month-on-month growth. It's very simple, right? I mean, if something is growing 25% month-on-month, there is something happening. So I look at once a month, what are all the things that are growing at 25%? Some of them may be brands, some of them may not be brands, but you keep looking at it, right? And I think then you keep looking for ideas. So that's one, which is a little bit more of the logical piece, right? The second is I look for spaces which have less competition, right? Even, we were talking about which spaces is brand me in, right? And I said health and wellness, not BPC. And the reason I picked health and wellness is Majestic Pure. You could say it's BPC, but it's actually a health and wellness. It's an aromatherapy wellness brand, right? And there is not that much competition.
Okay.
Right? So pick areas, so you keep looking for places which have some secular trend, but don't have too much competition. So that's the second sort of thing to look for. The third, which I think is the art part of it, is you have to find someone passionate to actually, we have, call it 10 brands, right? And we have 10 brand managers. I think there's an art to finding the right brand manager.
Okay.
And it is probably the most important decision that you make, right? There's capital allocation and people allocation. I think these are the two things, right? If I look at a portfolio of businesses that we actually run, apart from all the operating. Our profile is somebody who's actually started a business, right? May have worked, may not have worked. Most likely it hasn't worked. And then they go off into a larger company and sort of have scenes of scale and are now ready to come back to building, right? That profile works well, right? And you need somebody who has a passion, right? I have one of our smaller brands is a brand called Trust Basket, which is a gardening brand, which is part of the lifestyle business. But you need someone who likes gardening, right? Otherwise, it's very hard actually to be mechanical about it. See, there are two kinds of brand managers. There are category managers and there are brand managers, right? You need brand managers if you're building a brand, and which means you need passion, right? So, for example, in MyFitness, we have Meghna who runs our business and Ravi who runs our business, both of who are very passionate about fitness, right? And very passionate about what they eat and how do we make sure that it's actually good and healthy, right? You need that, right? We have actually, for our party celebration business, we have a team who's very passionate. So you go to the office, right? The corner of party props is always decorated.
They're always partying.
They're always partying, right? I mean, it's actually, by the way, they have a Friday party routine, right? Which is they actually go and it's in the office, but they do an interesting sort of event, right? They have some game. It's in the DNA. So you need a little bit of the right team and culture where you live the brand day in and day out. And I think that's actually sometimes forgotten. And it's very hard to do for larger companies, very easy to do for very small companies. As you get larger, you lose it and you make it all system and process and so on. And I think you need a little bit of both.
Got it. Sir, you mentioned the SKP report, Search
SQP,
Query
yeah.
and Performance report.
Yeah.
Are there other sources of data that one can study and find these gaps?
Yeah, I think, the classic one that a lot of people do is the Helium 10 report, right? Which I think, again, you can get interesting things. Google, by the way, has a bunch of insights that you can look for. I think now the other thing you can do actually is, look, ChatGPT has become the best market research tool. I think most people don't use it to do very good market research, but I think with the right prompts, you can actually get, I would say a shortened version of a McKinsey study done on market sizing, right? So as I think about, for example, how we wanted to sort of go global, right? In the case of MyFitness, Middle East seemed like an interesting, it's not the most intuitive choice, right? It's not the biggest peanut butter market, etc. But the reason we sort of figured it out is it's actually growing quite fast, right? It has a large South Asian population. It basically has a price point that is quite attractive for us. There is no problem with regulations, so there's no tariffs, etc. You can sort of send it very freely and it reaches in 4 or 5 days, right? And that research, you can now do a lot through ChatGPT.
How, sir?
You can actually, by the way, you can go and query saying, what's the market size? Give me a list of the top 20 peanut consuming nations which have no regulatory issues with India. And you'll get a list. I mean, you have to validate it and all of that sometimes is hallucination. But I'm saying you can get the basic research done now very well, which allows you to actually go deeper because the base research is there, the base numbers are there, you're not wasting time on that. Instead, you're debating choices, right? You're spending more time on judgment, less time on data. And I think that's a big change that has actually happened.
So walk me through this idea and let's go deeper.
Yeah.
How to use ChatGPT to do market research?
Yeah.
One is this, which is base level research to find categories.
Yeah.
What else would you use it for?
So I think there's a bunch of things that, in Mensa that we use it for, which I think are interesting. The second thing we use it for is how do we think about feature functionality, right? And what do I mean by feature functionality, right? So if you take peanut butter, let's stick with peanut butter for a bit, right? There are many aspects of peanut butter. There is how smooth is it, how dense is it, crunchy versus crispy versus smooth, right? There is also the level of sweetness, right? There is an aftertaste, etc., right? So what you can do is you can say, by the way, can you please design a survey for me, right? That actually says what are the 5-6 parameters that actually matter for peanut butter. And you can actually get the criteria, right? So otherwise you make up the criteria, right? So it actually goes through and sort of has the institutional knowledge of all of the different things that have actually happened by large companies, right? And you're able to sort of get at that sort of survey part quite easily, right? The third, by the way, that we use it for a lot, and this is not ChatGPT, but we use agents, is basically on pricing and ads. So if you think about tech, one of the big things is we sell globally, like I was telling you earlier. And if you want to sort of sell globally, you need to be on Amazon, you need to be on Target.com, Walmart, etc. And you need to constantly optimize on ads. So you're running a whole bunch of campaigns, right? Yeah. How do you actually build an agent that can move up and down a bid, right? Based on some criteria that you give it. Either you're optimizing for revenue at a certain base CM, or you're optimizing on CM at a certain base revenue. How do you build? So we've built out agents internally that actually do ads, right? Or we built out an agent that constantly changes pricing. So, if you think about it, you have perfect volume price elasticity, right? If you look at research over the last 3-4 years of data, you can figure out what the curve is. And
can you explain this, sir? Perfect volume price elasticity.
So here is what we do. You have, you can scrape prices. You can usually get volumes because, even in an Amazon, it says X thousand units weekly, right? You can just go in, you can get it from Helium 10. If you load all of that into a data lake, right? You have 3 years of data for not just you, but also for competitors and so on. And you sort of get a sense on, for every delta increase in price, what is the impact on volume, right? That used to be a very complicated analysis, right? You used to have, again, I keep going back to my old employer, McKinsey. McKinsey used to have teams doing pricing, right? Where you basically went through and created a curve that fit this volume price. Now you're able to do it, right? At the click of a couple of buttons. So what that allows is then basically for us to be much more scientific about pricing. So, we went through party celebrations, right? Party props. Or, we'll come to a couple of other examples. But how do you price it? You price it $499, $599, $699. You don't know, right? Usually, basically, you start with some guess. Generally, your belief is prices can only come down, you can't go up, right? So you start high and go low. But can you be more scientific about it? Now you have the data for it, right? But very few people use it. So, these are the unsexy parts of brand building, right? Pricing, ads, inventory forecasting, demand forecasting. How much inventory should you keep for each SKU, in what node? All of these now, I think you can build a tech backbone, and that's what we've done at BrandMe. We've built tech backbones for ads, pricing, consumer insighting, demand forecasting, and these go across all our brands. That's what creates the synergy, right? Because you also have lots of data, and your cost of tech is amortized over multiple brands, and therefore you can afford to build it. And I think that's a big differentiator. If you think about brand building and scale, your original conversation was first, how do you find niches? And then the second was, how do you scale, right? How do you think about 100 and 1,000? I think going to your second question of 100 and 1,000, tech is a large enabler of scale up. It's not the only enabler. I think if I think about a framework of what will it take to scale brands, right? I think technology is one. Operations is another. People and attracting the right kind of people, incentivizing them is the third. And the fourth is enabling a product development / sourcing engine that has more hits than misses. You will never have all hits, right? But how do you make sure that you have 2/3 hit, 1/3 not a hit? These are the four, and then maybe there's a fifth, which is how do you go from push to pull in a brand?
What does that mean, sir?
So most times when you think about selling a brand, how do you sell a brand in a marketplace? You put an ad on it, it shows up on top, and people click on it because the price is right and they buy it. That's classic push. Pull is when people search for your brand. So there is now, one of the things we track is across all marketplaces, how many times is MyFitness getting searched, and is it going up month on month on month on month? Party props month on month on month, villain month on month on month. How do we actually see that grow, right? And there are interesting ways to do it, right? So most people don't spend on display advertising at all. Because if you look at a near-term return on investment of advertising, if I spend 10 rupees on advertising, the maximum benefit I will get is what's called bottom of the funnel, right? And bottom of the funnel is when, you've already clicked, right? You search for something, you want to sort of buy it. That will usually, because your intent is already there.
Yeah.
I'm of a big belief that if you want to go from 100 crores to 1,000 crores, 25% of your marketing should be display advertising, which is increasing your brand awareness, right? Which very, very few people do.
Yeah, because
it's not immediate ROI.
counterintuitive.
It's not immediate ROI, right? But if you compound it, it's like SEO, right? Most people don't do it because there's no near-term impact. But if you take a 3-year view, 5-year view, 10-year view, it makes a massive impact. So how do you continue? The fifth point is, how do you continue to do what I call frugal, low-cost marketing to increase pull? You don't have to run a large 20 crore TV campaign. I've done all of that also in the Myntra days, right? But you don't need to run very large campaigns. You can have always on marketing that actually really does this. So these 5 things I think are quite important for scale up.
Beautiful. And sir, while speaking about tech, we also discovered another niche. There is a large space for a tech company to come and solve these problems for D2C companies, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because they're aware of the problem, but they're not aware of the solution.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if they're actively thinking about a solution.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, very few people are actually thinking of how do we build agents who can scrape data and then make decisions.
Yes.
They usually have people for that.
Correct.
The moment you go down from people to tech, the cost dramatically decreases.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then a tech company can actually service multiple clients with probably the same requirements, with a few custom requirements. And that's also a huge gap, right?
I think it's a massive gap. We are starting to build some interesting tech. We haven't externalized it yet, but I think there's an opportunity to externalize it. I'll give you a simple example. Online digital first, you don't sell a product, you sell an image, right? You click on an image, it's not a real product. So, about 12 months ago, I would say 90% of our products were shot, using a photographer, usually if it was lifestyle with a model, or a setup like this, etc., right? Now, 40% or 40% or less than 40% is done through that. 60% is done through AI generated images. and there's no difference in click-through rates, right? It's much faster, time comes down. An average catalog cost, if you get a model and shoot, is about 1200 to 1400 rupees. If you do it through an AI-generated prompt, even assuming the license fees that you pay, all of that, it's 25 rupees. It makes a dramatic difference to your unit economics, right? If you think about selling X 100 units, you've done 1/10 the cost. So going back to your point, I think, there is a big opportunity to build what I would say are purposeful, business-oriented AI solutions that can solve real problems, right? Whether it's a collections agent, right? Whether it's an ads agent, whether it's a demand forecasting agent. But the reason we are able to do it is we're doing it to solve a real problem that we have in our group of brands, right? If you do it outside in, it becomes a little bit more theoretical in my view. So I think there's an opportunity, and I do think there's an opportunity. I think this can be the next big Shopify, right? See, if you sort of fast forward in life, I don't know how it'll play out, but one of the theories is you have agents who are personal shoppers who are owned by the consumer. You have agents who are brands, right? And they talk to one another, and that's how the transaction happens. Let's assume that happens sometime in the future, right? Which means, by the way, any middle layer sort of goes away. If you think about it like that at some level, then if you think about a Shopify-like ecosystem, you need all of these tools, right, to determine what each brand needs to do. And so can you build out an ads agent? So the way we think about it is there are many elements of brand building, right? Product development, launch price, how do you kickstart, how do you do ads, how do you do brand marketing, how do you do performance marketing? Each of these can we think of as a individual tech product or agent, is how we're thinking about it. It's very early days for us, but I think over the next year and a half, it can actually be quite interesting to see whether this itself can become a quite large business.
Yeah. That's wonderful, sir.
Hi guys, if you loved watching this clip and if you want to do a deep dive into the podcast, we've mentioned the link in the description. So click that link, watch that podcast and take notes. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more clips.